I am Eleanor Hart, and I learned the weight of power in a small house with thin walls. It stood on a quiet street in Boston, red brick softened by years of weather and hope. The mortgage sat at $88,000, and every dollar heavy as a stone in my pocket. I painted the door myself a calm blue, slept on the floor the first week, and stacked ledgers where paintings should have hung. From that house, I took the early train to New York, sold ideas to bored men in tall rooms, and came back at night to count what I had saved. Later, when the numbers grew, I bought a tall place on Fifth Avenue for $24 million, all windows and hush, a door that opened at the nod of a doorman who knew my coffee and my silence. Money gave me rooms. It did not give me rest. I began with one store in Ohio, plain shelves and a cash box with a stubborn lock. I learned how a line forms and how to read the tilt of a mouth when a price is too high. I learned to buy light and sell comfort. 10 stores became 50, and then the map needed a second page. In Chicago, I met Henry Cole, a lawyer who spoke like a train schedule, on time, dry, exact. He taught me how to slip steel inside paper. Write your will as if you are already gone, Henry said, and your wishes as if you are still here. I took his advice and wrote long. Across the ocean, in Europe, old partners count in pounds and send letters on thick paper. I read every line and ignored every charm. Some sent gifts. I sent them back. I have always trusted the balance sheet more than the smile. My son, Mark, grew up between the Boston brick and the New York glass, a child of hallways and elevators and long views over the Hudson River. I gave him summer days in Maine, cold mornings in Chicago, and museum Saturdays in Philadelphia. I tried to show him the steady joy of useful work. He loved speedboats, fast cars, and the quick flash of being seen. He learned cleverness. He did not learn patience. Then he met Grace under chandeliers in Manhattan and told me she was warm. She was cool. She said legacy the way others say dessert, as if it must be eaten before it melts. When Grace visited my Fifth Avenue house, her gaze skipped over people and landed on objects. The rug, the frame, the safe. I tried to love her because he did. Some loves come with a bill. I began to draw a map that did not point to Mark. With Henry, I built a trust for public libraries across America, seeded with $4 billion and rules as firm as a winter road. We set aside £20 million from old deals in Europe for a museum fund that would carry art to small towns, Montana Plains, Ohio Crossroads, Texas courthouses, because beauty should not be fenced by a city line. I wrote scholarships for nurses in Denver, housing grants for teachers in Los Angeles, seed money for women who open bright shops on quiet streets in Seattle. For Mark, I left a narrow lane, $60,000 a year and a list of things he must do. Work, study, and stand on his own feet. When he found out, he called me cruel. Grace called me a relic, an old queen in a glass cage. I poured tea, smiled, and tightened the locks on the study. The study in the River House is my true chapel. Oak desk, leather chair, lamps that throw a warm cone on the paper. In one drawer lies a silver letter opener, in another the key to a safe that does not hold what people think. On the wall hangs a small map of America, pins where the stores began, pins where the grants go. I can trace my life with my fingertip, from the first receipt to the last signature, and feel how the road bends toward others or curls back on itself. A good fortune should move outward like a tide. A bad one sits still and rots. Amelia, my neighbor from the Boston days, knows this house better than anyone but me. She has a trustworthy voice and shoes that do not announce themselves. We walk the halls together some afternoons, two women with a quiet plan. She checks the dock cameras, I check the accounts. Henry calls from Chicago and asks for the time it takes to read a paragraph out loud. We do not speak of fear. We speak of sequencing, of what must be done before what, of where the light switches are when the room goes dark. I think often of the first key I ever owned, the one to that Boston door. I keep it in a dish by the window of the River House, bright with use. Houses hold memory. They also hold warnings. When Grace laughs too sweetly and Mark's eyes slide past mine toward the safe, I hear the thin walls of that first house creak, as if reminding me that what is built can be unbuilt, and what is given can be taken back. So I write and I sign, and I move numbers like pieces on a board, not to hoard but to direct. If the river ever demands a price, I intend to meet it on my feet, in my house, with my country spread before me like a ledger that still balances. That morning, I was waiting in my chair. The leather had warmed to my shape in the study that faces the Hudson, and the first light of New York slipped across the river like a silver ribbon. I set my cup on the oak desk, turned the small radio low, and watched the dock. The house was quiet but awake, the kind of quiet a house learns after long years in America when it has heard joy and trouble and knows to keep both. I had slept an hour, no more. The rest of the night, I spent walking the halls, checking latches, touching frames, reminding myself that fear and care are not the same. Fear shakes the hand, care guides it. Amelia arrived before dawn, as we had agreed, letting herself in with the old Boston key I had given her. She wore a dark coat and the steady look I have trusted since the days when the brick house still smelled of fresh paint. We did not hug. We did not need to. She set a small canvas bag on the rug, tools, a flashlight, spare batteries, and went to the mudroom where the dock screens glow in a soft row. The screens showed the boathouse, the stern of the rented boat, and the reach of river behind it. I had installed those cameras 2 years earlier after a rash of thefts along the stretch. The law incident wrote polite thank yous. The neighbors smiled. I kept the footage, and I kept the habit of looking. In Chicago, Henry Cole woke with the clock and called at 6, his voice dry and exact. "Are we in position?" he asked. I told him we were. He read again, as if to a jury, the sequence that would follow. The boat leaves, the act occurs, the boat returns, we record, we secure, we wait. He reminded me, in calm words, of the trust documents already filed, of the charitable transfers already in flight. $4 billion to libraries across America, £20 million from Europe to the museum program, new grants lined like stones in a path. He repeated that Mark's lane was narrow by design, $60,000 a year with work and study, and that no wave on the Hudson could wash that ink away. I thanked him and ended the call. A good plan does not erase sorrow. It only keeps sorrow from steering. At 7, the hired captain texted to confirm the boat's readiness. He was a careful man, born in New Jersey, raised to look at weather, and not much else. Amelia answered his message, as planned, from a phone number we had set aside for this day. "Proceed," she wrote. We had told Mark the night before that I wished for a last private ride at dawn, that I wanted the wind and the river and my son, that I was ready to discuss legacy, as Grace liked to say. I wrote those words in my neat hand, placed the note where he would find it, and let the lore do its work. When hunger wears perfume, it is still hunger. At 7:30, the boat slid from the boathouse, small against the long gray water. On the screen, I saw Mark at the rail, his shoulders squared, his jaw tight. Grace kept close to him, one hand tucked into his elbow, a picture of comfort for anyone who did not know her eyes. The captain stood at the helm, gaze fixed on the channel markers. The camera on the stern, a small lens hidden under a lip of paint, caught all of this, and I watched in the warm cone of my desk lamp, the leather chair cupping my back like a steady hand. I did not speak. The house did not speak. The river carried them out and curved them north. The mannequin waited under a tarp in the boathouse, where Amelia had placed it before dawn. I had bought it for $1,200 from a rescue supply company through a quiet intermediary, the kind of purchase that leaves few ripples. We had dressed it in my spare coat, my scarf, a string of pearls so modest only Grace would think they were real. A weight sewn into the waist would pull it down after a few seconds, long enough for a camera to see the splash, short enough that a curious eye from shore would not. My hairbrush had left a few strands for the collar. My perfume had left a soft trace. It was an ugly trick and an ugly day, and still I tell you this. Ugliness does not always belong to the person who names it. The river widened and the morning brightened. On the stern feed, the city looked like a saw of glass, and the wake lay behind the boat like a white seam. Then came the moment. Grace stepped close, mouth near my son's ear. He nodded. She reached for the figure in my coat with the same sweet concern she uses when a camera is near. I saw her hand press, saw the motion of strain, saw the hard set of Mark's face as he looked away from the act he wanted and yet could not stomach. The weighted figure tipped and went.
Splash.
The water opened, swallowed, smoothed. Grace's mouth made a small "oh." Mark's lips folded into a thin line. The captain, still fixed on the channel ahead, did not turn. The camera did not blink. The house did not breathe. I did not either. When the boat came back around, the two of them had a plan ready. Grace rubbed her eyes until they were red, then tucked herself against Mark's chest like a fragile bird. Mark took out his phone, then put it away, then took it out again, rehearsing grief like a line from a play. As the hull kissed the dock, Amelia muted the feed and looked at me. "You're certain?" she asked. I nodded. Certainty is a luxury. Clarity is a duty. I rose from my chair, smoothed my skirt, and walked with her through the hall where portraits and plans keep one another company. We let them enter. The front door opened to their voices, too fast, too loud, too arranged. "Mother," Grace called, as if the house could be tricked by sugar. "Mom," Mark followed, smaller, younger, one syllable shorter, and in that moment I felt the old ache of the morning he was born, a snowy Monday when I promised him peace. Promises are contracts with time. Time keeps its own counsel. Amelia guided them to the sitting room as if nothing were amiss. The captain, still pale, told them he would fetch help. He left. Grace wept into Mark's coat. Mark paced. They asked where I was. Amelia said, "I often sat in the study in the morning." She offered coffee. In the study, the screens kept still watch. The stern camera held the silver proof, a tight and steady witness that did not fear tears. I pressed a small key on the desk. The filing drawer opened with its clean, oiled slide, and I took out the envelope Henry had shipped from Chicago by overnight courier, chain of custody forms, a logbook, a sealed drive. I placed the drive by the keyboard and the forms at the edge of the desk, where they could be signed in even strokes. Then I sat back down and let the house breathe again, the way a house does when it knows the next scene has already been rehearsed. At 9, the police arrived. They were courteous, the way New York officers are when the zip code whispers money. I greeted them in the hall, alive, dry, in the same black dress I had worn to sleep and to wait. Grace made a sound like cutlery dropped on tile. Mark's face went white, then flushed the color of raw brick. I invited the officers to the study, offered them chairs, and told them in plain words that I was safe and that a crime had been attempted against me on the river that morning. I did not raise my voice. I did not add color. I let the screen speak. We watched the small film together, the river keeping time in the background as if this, too, were one of its long stories. Questions followed. Could the figure have been me? Not likely, the officer said after the third replay, noting the stiff, wrong motion of the fall, the way the scarf did not cling. Had Mark or Grace known of the cameras? They said they had not. Why had I not called at once? Because I wished to be certain, I answered, and because the safest place for me at 7 in the morning was this chair in this house, with the lock set and my neighbor present. You set a trap, one officer said, without malice. I nodded. I said a truth, I said, and I waited for it to arrive. When the room finally emptied, officers to the porch, Mark and Grace to the edge of silence, I felt the weariness that comes when a long-held breath is at last released. Amelia poured fresh coffee with hands as steady as the river clock. She asked if I wanted to rest. I shook my head. Rest is not what this hour required. This hour required choices. I told her to call Henry, to say the evidence was clean, the chain was intact, the requests for distance and restraining orders should move at once. I told her to ask the captain to return, to give his statement, and then to take the rest of the week with pay. I told her to schedule the couriers for the drives, one to the district attorney, one to our secure archive, one to my counsel in Chicago. We do not wave our money like flags in this house. We fold it into action. Only after the door closed on the last visitor did I let myself walk the rooms in the long, slow way I used after my husband died. The river house is not grand, not like Fifth Avenue. Its rooms are human in size. The study smells of oak and warm dust, the hallway of old varnish, the kitchen of coffee and lemon oil. In the mudroom, I paused by the screens. I placed my palm against the glass, as if to bless a faithful friend. On the dock, the water lapped and the ropes creaked. A gull swept past like a piece of paper that had escaped a desk. America was awake and going about its day. In that calm, I knew what I would do next. I kept the houses, Boston brick and New York glass, but I changed the rules of entry. New locks, new codes, new limits on names that used to open doors just by existing. I moved another share of the fortune that afternoon, $38 million from the sale of the Chicago glass house, into funds for women who start small, bright shops on quiet streets. I wrote letters to the libraries and to the museum program, and one short note to Mark. "You are safe if you choose to be," I wrote. "Safety is a job. Do the work." For Grace, I wrote nothing. Some debts are best settled by silence. That night, I returned to the chair and watched the river take the moon in its dark hand. I thought of the first house door I ever unlocked, the one in Boston bought for $88,000, and how the key felt like a promise pressed into my palm. A house is more than walls. It is a witness. So is a river. So is a woman who has learned to wait without fear. The plan had worked, but plans do not keep you warm. What keeps you warm is the knowledge that you chose your way with care and that your country, my America, still has room for mercy and for steel. I closed my eyes and slept. The chair held me like a promise, and the morning I had waited for slipped at last into the past. The law moved first, steady as a clock. 2 detectives from New York came back to the river house with a camera crew that belonged to no one but the district attorney. They took statements in low voices. They copied the drive from the Stern camera and signed the chain of custody forms on my oak desk. Henry called from Chicago while they worked and kept his voice calm. Amelia brought coffee and stayed by the door like a quiet guard. When it was done, the detectives thanked me in the careful tone people use when a large sum of money may be listening. I told them the same thing I had told the river. I wanted distance, not drama. I wanted the truth to hold, and I wanted my house to be a safe place again. Mark did not look at me when the officers asked their last question. He kept staring at the rug like a man reading a map he did not understand. Grace watched the detectives and counted breaths, as if breath were a currency she could spend to buy time. When they left, she turned to me with a face as smooth as a new plate. "You're not going to ruin our lives," she said. "You don't want the papers." She said papers the way a child says storm, as though thunder belongs to someone who can switch it off. I told her I would not chase headlines. I told her I would accept the court's work and then let it be. She seemed almost relieved, as if a smaller cliff had appeared in place of a taller one. She never asked for forgiveness. She asked for rooms and keys, and a life that would look like the life she had planned to steal. In the days that followed, the city did what cities do. New York kept walking. The Hudson kept moving under gray skies, and then blue. I signed forms. I moved numbers. I let the plans I had already written come alive. I sold the glass house near Chicago for $38 million and moved the full amount into funds for women who open bright shops on quiet streets in Seattle, Denver, and Philadelphia, places where hope needs a small door and a sturdy lock. The $4 billion for libraries across America was already in motion. The £20 million from Europe for the museum program had landed in its account with a clean thud. I added smaller grants that felt like stitches. $6 million for nurses in Cleveland, for $0.5 million for housing near schools in Los Angeles, $2 million for mobile clinics that drive through Maine when the snow lets them pass. Money does not love people. People love people. Still, money can make a light switch work when night comes early. A prosecutor came to the River House one afternoon with 2 offers. The first was a long case the state could build if I wished to stand for it. The second was a shorter road, restraining orders, public record, supervised restitution, and a charge that would draw a clear line without turning the next 5 years into a theater. I chose the second road. I said the word distance, and the prosecutor nodded. She had neat hands and a way of listening with her eyes. She looked out at the water for a moment and said the river has seen worse and better and will see both again. I liked her for saying that. She did not thank me for the money that would never cross her desk. She thanked me for the camera that had told the truth. I wrote one letter to Mark. I kept it plain. You will receive $60,000 a year. It is enough for rent, food, study, and the dignity of work. It is not enough for boats, cars, or a kind of life that only money can perform. If you work, you will keep it. If you lie, you will lose it. I will not meet with you. That is the price. I mailed it and did not wait for a reply. He sent one anyway, a stack of pages that started with blame, moved to memory, and ended in a small line of need. I read it once and put it in the drawer with the old keys. A mother's love is not the same as a mother's door. One can stay open when the other must close. Grace hired a lawyer who wore silk in summer and spoke like a sales floor. She tried to bargain with a story that changed shape each time she told it. The camera did not change shape. The river did not change shape. The court granted the orders I asked for and wrote them down in lines that read like the rules of a plain game. No contact, no gain from my name, no step onto my land. She left the courthouse with her chin high and a smile made for a lens that was not there. I watched from inside a car and felt less anger than I thought I would. She was a story about hunger. I do not hate hunger. I only refuse to feed it. I kept both houses. The brick one in Boston, where the first receipts still whisper from a tin, and the River House in New York, where the study window makes a moving picture of America every hour. We changed the locks and the codes. We changed the list of names that could call the guard and be waved through. I rehired the gardener in Boston who knows where the roots run under the walk, and I raised the salary of the woman who keeps the New York kitchen honest and bright. I asked Amelia to stay with me a while, not as a guard, but as a guest who carries calm in her pocket. We take slow walks and point out small repairs a house asks for when it trusts you again. A hinge, a shade, a loose nail that ticks like a tiny clock. Henry came to the River House with a thin briefcase and a warm coat. We sat in the study while the water flashed and dimmed under winter light. He reviewed the trusts and the gifts and the simple rules that keep paper from twisting in the hands of men who like to twist. Then he closed the briefcase and talked to me the way a friend talks when the room is not a courtroom. He asked what I wanted to do with the time I had bought back. I told him I wanted to sit in my chair in the morning and know that the chair would still be there at night. I told him I wanted to stand in a branch library in Ohio and see a child sign her name for the first card she ever owns. I told him I wanted to walk into a small museum in Montana and watch a boy from a ranch look up at a painting that came to him from a city he has not yet seen. Henry said those were clear wishes. He said clear wishes make the best paper. Some evenings I drive past the addresses that once made me feel large. Fifth Avenue still glows in the glass I sold long ago. The stores I started now run without me. A young woman in Cleveland counts a register the way I once did. A teacher in Los Angeles turns a key in a door near her school and knows she can sleep without fear. A shop owner in Seattle wipes a window and watches the morning bus stop, ready to open and say hello. These are not my lives. They're only proof that money can be taught to behave. There is a price to every goodbye. Mine was not only the cost of a rubber figure, a hidden lens, a lawyer's time, or a house whose locks now know new codes. The price was a son I cannot invite to Sunday supper, a silence where a laugh used to be, a chair that holds me because it must. I pay it. I think of the girl I was in Boston, painting a door and counting out $88,000 one hard dollar at a time. I think of the woman I am, older and quieter, with numbers so large people whisper them like spells. $72.7 billion for billion dollars, 20 million pounds, $38 million. The loud numbers made the headlines in other years. The quiet numbers will make mornings that belong to people I will never meet. Some nights the river is black glass. Some mornings it is pewter. I sit with a cup of coffee and the radio low and track the small boats that move like sentences written in water. America hums around me. Europe writes its tidy letters and counts in pounds. My houses stand. My neighbor laughs at my terrible omelets. My lawyer sends drafts that read like clean fences. My son is alive somewhere, which is not nothing. My daughter-in-law is a closed file, which is enough. The plan did not save me. The waiting did. The giving will keep me steady. Goodbye to the river? Not yet. I am still here, in my chair, in my house, in my country. I am the woman who learned to count early and trust late. I am the woman who chose distance, then turned the space into light.